In this video, I'll just go over some of the properties that we have of the matrix operations that we introduced in the previous video. These aren't really things you need to memorize, but occasionally if you were doing long matrix computations, then knowing these could maybe shorten it up. So the first one is that if you add up two matrices together, that in fact it is commutative. So again, if I just pick some random matrices here, and I wrote them in the opposite order, right? The second matrix first, and so on. This just tells us that we are going to get the same answer. And considering how matrix addition works, where you just add the individual elements, I think this makes sense, right? Same thing as adding up regular numbers. The next one is that if you add a matrix plus, now we can't add the number 0 because it wouldn't make sense, but we can add the 0 matrix here, and this just tells you that when you add the 0 matrix, you get back to the same one you started with. This next one here is talking about the identity matrix that was briefly mentioned in a previous video. That's where you have 1 along the diagonal elements and everywhere else is a 0. That's the 2 by 2 identity there. The 3 by 3 version of the identity is this. And what it's saying is if you multiply by the identity, you will work out always back to what you started with. It's the same idea as multiplying by the number 1, how it doesn't change the number you started with. But here we're talking about matrices. Next up is if we multiply a matrix times the 0 matrix, it is always going to be the 0 matrix answer. In fact, you could multiply the number 0 times the matrix and it would still be the 0 matrix answer. So it makes sense to multiply a matrix times the number 0. It does not make sense to to add a matrix to the number 0. Anyways, so that works. The next thing on here is the distributive property. Just says that you are allowed to distribute A to the B and the C. That's the nice property we've seen in regular algebra class. Only thing I want to be careful with is if your A is in front here and you're distributing it, you need to make sure A is in front on both multiplications. As we saw in the previous video, that if you multiply things in the wrong order, it's not going to give you the same answer. The next one is not super useful. It just tells you that if you transpose a matrix and then transpose the answer, you get back to what you started in. The next one says that if you transpose over A plus B, you can essentially distribute the transpose and do the A transpose and B transpose separately. And the last one's kind of interesting. It says if you're multiplying matrices and try to do a transpose, you can do the transpose of each individually, but you have to reverse the order of multiplication. Again, this is not one that's going to come up very often, but just in case you ever have to use it, just remember that it reverses the order of multiplication there.